It is because Israel is supported by the United States that this OPEC, which is, again, lots of countries in the Middle East that produce oil, they punish us by shutting off, if you want to use this metaphor, shutting off the oil faucet to the United States. To basically coerce us into not supporting Israel. And what that does is that drives prices up, because prices are heavily influenced by oil and gasoline prices. Okay? You see it on a day-to-day basis when you get gasoline. I mean, we're up a little bit. If you want to know if gasoline is going to increase, all you guys have to do is just go on like any app and look at the stock market and look at oil prices. Right now, oil is like $53 a barrel. If it keeps going up, your gas prices are going to go up. If it goes down, your gas prices are going to go down. You guys know what happens when we limit the supply of something, right? The supply goes down, the price goes up, and that's what's happening. Inflation is fueled by the oil problems in the early 1970s. And these problems are going to continue throughout the 1970s to the point in like 1978, 79, where you're going to have gas lines. Oh my gosh, like, can you imagine going to get gas and waiting 20 cars ahead of you? You know what I mean? Like, and maybe there might be gas. Oh. But that's what's causing things to increase. You need gas to transport stuff. The prices go up. Also, a new phenomenon is happening called deindustrialization. You're starting to see jobs that used to be in the middle of the country that are manufacturing jobs, all the way back from like World War II, right, with the factories and so on. Those jobs in the steel industry, particularly, are being shifted to corporations headquartered in Japan as well as Germany. Okay, so we're starting to lose jobs. The term Rust Belt describes the area in Middle America here, like places like Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, like kind of the football cities, in America's heartland, which jobs are being lost. And they're being moved to cheaper places. Again, eventually they're all going to move to China, right? So things are totally like changing, and it's a troubled economy, and it's not an easy question to deal with. Like, how do we bring jobs back to the United States? President Nixon, nobody really knows. How do we make America competitive again, and how do we do that? The new phenomenon is called stagflation. Stagflation means this: stagnation, economic stagnation, and inflation combined is a very bad thing called stagflation. It's like a double whammy in terms of economics. It is something that we haven't seen before up till that point, and it's something that will persistently be there throughout the 1970s, no matter what president you have. If it's Nixon, if it's Ford, if it's Carter, it's going to be kind of a crisis. One of the cool outcomes of it, as we'll see next week, is Americans will start buying cheaper, more gas-efficient vehicles to deal with the oil crisis, right? It's kind of like what happens now. Like when gas prices get up so high, people start buying, like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but hybrid cars and vehicles, like me, we drive a Prius. Yeah. So it's like sales of those are increasing like crazy. So like sometimes it takes economic shocks like that to kick America's economy in the back end and be like, man, make better cars, make more fuel efficient vehicles and stuff. And eventually that's what's going to happen. But in the 70s, it is a pretty dark time economically. Oh no. Now, that's the foreign policy stuff. That's the extra stuff. Let's get to the domestic policy stuff. Now, domestically, Richard Nixon, a good president in some ways, but President Nixon had a problem, and the problem was paranoia. Okay? President Nixon, and by the way, Watergate, when I talk about Watergate, everything that I say now will make sense a little bit later. Remember that election map I showed you? Keep that in mind, 1972 for walloping. President Nixon was a paranoid guy. He was paranoid about his enemies. He was paranoid about how history would remember him. In the Oval Office in the White House, people used to say that he used to carry around a yellow legal pad to just jot down pretty much everything that he wanted to say, because he didn't want to mess up when he talked in front of the camera or talked to people. Like, he wanted to be good. He wanted to practice being good. He was very concerned about how people looked at him, and he was very self-conscious. I'm like that. I'm totally like that. Like, I'm always worried about how people see me. Like, I shouldn't worry about that, right? Because I'm a decent, good-looking man, but you know what I'm saying. Like, I'm always like, oh man, is this going to be good? Is this going to suck? Is this gonna... President Nixon was probably like that to the nth degree. So much so that he had the White House, he had installed a taping system throughout the entire White House. Not like tape, I'm talking about like recording tape. Okay, to record like conversations that were happening in the White House, to record this and record that. He wanted to know what was going on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's a little creepy, okay? This is before they had cameras and closed circuit television and all that kind of stuff, but they have reel-to-reel tape, like, not cassette tapes, but like big tape. So just remember that. Nixon has the White House tapes. He's very paranoid about his enemies. He's very worried about the anti-war movement bringing down his presidency. He will do almost anything to get reelected. And that's where our story about the Watergate break-in starts. First of all, the break-in. This here is the Watergate office building. It is still there in Washington, D.C. It is a massive, huge complex. I'm going to say it's probably just a little bit bigger than Fresno City College. It is enormous. Inside inside Watergate, this office building, is the Democratic Party's campaign office. Okay, where the Democrats are going to run their campaign for George McGovern in 1972. Okay, and in this office they have the headquarters. So they have telephones, they have, files, they have all kinds of stuff that they are strategizing about how to win the election. Of course, they get slapped in the election, right? Like they don't even register. But President Nixon is very concerned because, of course, they're a threat. Well, on the evening of June 17th, 1972, there's 5 men caught breaking in. Now, they are caught only because, and this is the funny thing, they are caught because a piece of tape, okay, a piece of tape is taped to the I don't know what you would call it, the thing that locks, when you close a door, the deadbolt, yes. And what they do is they tape it with like some duct tape to keep the door open. But the burglars forget to take the tape off when they leave. So the janitors at the Watergate discover that, and they think something's afoot. Anyways, here's what these guys do. They break into the office And they look for files, they wiretap phones, to listen in, right? Nixon's paranoid. These guys are discovered hours later, and they're members of a group called CREEP, Committee to Re-elect the President. This is what you call a second-rate burglary. Guys that don't do this for a living, that don't live a life of crime, okay? But they blow it on so many levels. If they would have taken that stupid piece of tape off the door, the janitor probably wouldn't have even known. Therefore, the janitor wouldn't have called the cops. Well, history is what it is, isn't it? So, this comes out in the media. And now you get the cover-up. Now, what is worse, ladies and gentlemen? The cover-up or the crime? I agree. The cover-up is bad. Like, it's bad enough to have an affair with somebody else. Well, I'm just saying, it's bad enough to do that, but it's worse to try to cover it up and say, well, it's not what you think, honey. Yeah, right. Okay, so you're not going to get out of that. So Nixon, it is discovered, is involved in the cover-up. Now, these two guys right here, this is Carl Bernstein and George Woodward. And basically, these are two reporters from the Washington Post. And what these guys' job is they're the ones that are on the Watergate break-in from the very beginning. And they're getting their information about what actually happened from a guy codenamed Deep Throat. You're like, what? Deep Throat? Deep Throat's a guy who works in the White House who wants his identity secret, so nobody will know about it, that leaks information about Nixon to these guys. Okay, and he meets them at weird hours of the night, 3 a.m. in a parking garage in Washington, D.C. And basically, he will share information on the condition that he will not be mentioned in the stories, or he will be known. In fact, the identity of Deep Throat is going to be kept secret until he's dead. And by the way, I'll tell you who Deep Throat was later. It's like the funniest name ever. But anyways, Nixon, of course, goes on national television and says, very famously, he says, I am not a crook. I'm not a crook. Well, he doesn't really do this. But he says, I am not a crook. I've worked for everything I've got. He actually says it just like that. Just like that. Yeah, you could Google that. He says it. He says, I don't know anything about the break-in. I am clean. I've been in this business for years, and I don't do stuff like that. If other people have done that, that's on them. I don't know anything about it. But Deep Throat's talking to Woodward and Bernstein at weird hours of the night, and it's getting published the next day in the paper saying, yeah, he knows about it. And, yeah, he's involved in the cover-up. Mm-hmm. So, all throughout Nixon's second term is just going to be this battle between Nixon and the press and Congress to get at the truth. In other words, Nixon's going to try to steer everybody away from the truth. Congress is going to try to get at the truth, and that's where we come to the hearings. Oh, man. By summer of 1973, by 1 year later, during congressional hearings, 7 of Nixon's staff are arrested and sent to jail. So President Nixon's staff, some of his highest level people that work in the White House, are going to be put away in jail because of their burglary and their burglary. And of course, Nixon is like, I nothing to do with it. Nope. But all throughout the summer of 73 and the early 70s,